Welcome back to the Prison Pod. This is season 4, episode 6 already. I am looking forward to our guest today. Justin Ennis is joining us from California, and he's going to talk about some great work that he does with Pathway to Kinship. Hi, hello, Justin. How are you doing today?
I'm fine, Valerie. Thanks for asking.
And I want to give you an opportunity to tell a little bit about yourself and the work that you do.
A little bit about myself. I'm 37 years old. I spent most of my adult life incarcerated. That's where I ended up changing my life from being a rebellious youth to wanting to be a proactive member in civilization. And I ended up using the tools that were put in place in institutions. Not saying that it's a perfect system, but it's definitely a place where I learned I could turn a punishment into an opportunity. I took those tools, and because I started living counter to that culture, I was given an opportunity to be free after serving only 12 years. I was released, never having had a job before, and having very minimal construction experience, but that was the first place that responded to my resume. I took prison supervisor reports, a few chronos over there, kind of told them my story about what I had done, how I felt about it, and why I thought my criminal background actually made me an asset, because I was striving to live in amends for the repair I had done, to repair the harm that I had done. And from there, I climbed to being a gopher, to being an electrician, to being a foreman, to being a project manager for a pretty big commercial developer in the San Louis Obispo area, all within the span of 2 years. And outside of just, I guess that is, I work with Pathway to Kinship, where the guy Marc Vahanian had come into the institutions, and I really liked the framework, the 7 keys that he had made, and I took a lot of stuff and kind of put it together and used those keys, or really just principles, right? And principles are very applicable across multiple areas of life, and I kind of documented some of the things that I had done, even just as simple as we made a financial literacy course where I document how I started saving money, what I had learned, and inside where people said, "Oh, I'll do it when I get out," and I started saying, "Well, why not now?" I saved up, and I got out, and I continued to save while everybody else was buying Jordans and energy drinks. I shopped at Goodwill and saved my money that I would have had to spend on rent while the state was subsidizing my transitional housing, and I went right from transitional housing into home ownership. It wasn't my white picket fence house or anything like that, my forever home, but it was an investment, and 2 years later I'm renting it out, and it's a income producing property. I just screenshotted and used my experience. I cited the information where I had use that from wisdom of others. It's nothing that I specifically created, just really more reinforcements of what other people have done and how I did it, as an encouragement to other people that they can do it too. We can build from nothing into something. And I think, as much as I think a lot of my reaching back is also what has given me a hand up, so to speak.
Now, do you go into the facilities and present the curriculum yourself?
I go into my local facility every week. We're in talks with Juvenile Hall to start reaching out to Juvenile Hall on a weekly basis in San Luis County. And then the curriculum is in, I believe, 11 different institutions throughout the state, primarily Marc Vahanian going into those, but I will go speak at either initiating or graduation classes. That way they can just see that somebody that's been in those shoes is a real tangible person. It's not stuff that we're just writing down and saying, "Oh, sure, you can theoretically do it." It's more like the relationship there to say, "Oh man, he knows, he's been in these shoes, and and if he can do it, I can do it, kind of thing. And it really provides that gap. And like Pathway's Kinship mission statement is that a lot of times we're in prison because we want to live counter to that culture. We feel rejected by that culture, that mainstream culture in some sense or another. To say, society does want you. I think it provides, it helps people merge into the culture a little bit better to know that they're wanted.
Now, the curriculum that you've helped develop, is that available in other states or is that only in California?
It could be available wherever. It's in a workbook. Like I mentioned, it has a lot of screenshots. It has the citations for people to study further. It could be done at a really low threshold of entry, as simple as sending it and letting people read through it, and they can even do all the answers right there in the workbook.
So is that something that's available like that I could purchase?
Yeah, we haven't gotten there quite yet, but that's like what we're trying to do is people are expressing more interest in it. It's really just kind of been grassroots, real hands-on up to this point, but as more and more people are reaching out and saying, hey, we like this product, we're having to look for ways that, well, how can we expand and increase the availability?
Because, our listeners don't always know where we are, but I'm in Maine and you're in California, and I'm assuming you're in California today.
I am in California today.
Okay.
Most of my
Because you
traveling
never.
is here.
So I'm always interested in what's going on in other states because Maine has been pretty progressive in a lot of ways, but California is like knocking it right out of the ballpark as far as a lot of states. I mean, there's a lot of programming going on. The life without parolers that are coming home that went in young. There's, a lot of progressive things going on within the system. That's why I asked if that wasn't available outside of California, because I'm sure people might take a look at it here at Department of Corrections because they're always looking for new programming that works.
And that's what's been most important to us is not making it. We want people to take something from it. This program means a lot to us, and because we've put a little, put an emphasis on going into the institutions as well as ensuring people do the work to get the credit, to get the certificates and things, rather than just passing them through. Our 2-year data collection of data, it's actually shown almost 100% increased success rate on gaining insight by a tangible measurement, which would be the Board of Parole hearings finding our participants suitable over the general public. So I think that shows that we're moving in the right direction, and that's our goal, is for people to really get change from this thing.
Well, and that's the most important. I mean, you can have all the programs in the world, and if they don't make a difference, then it's wasting everybody's time.
And I think some of that is accountability. There's a lot of good things out there. It's about having them rolled out properly, right? More than good intentions, but making sure there's some type of goal that's met, something measurable.
I'm going to ask you something totally different. Did you have any religious background or faith when you went into the system? Because I know a lot of people, that's a very important thing to them, and a lot of people that don't have that before they go in, they find it while they're in.
I mean, I was a good Catholic. I went to a mass on Easter and Christmas by force, and got out of there got out of that obligation as soon as I could. But when I went in, I did have like an experience with a higher power, with God. It was kind of a strange thing. I was sentenced to serve life in prison, and I thought that's when I was really just going to lose it. But for some reason, I kind of felt like a calm that it had some type of purpose, but I just didn't quite know yet. But my mind was more open and kind of seeking that opportunity. For 6 years, I kind of just I was abstinent in there. I wasn't using drugs or alcohol because I could admit they defeated me, and I was going to meetings because I could admit at least that. But then it wasn't until I got this picture of something my daughter wrote to Santa talking about, dear Santa, can I get, your usual kid stuff? And then it said, and please help my dad get out of prison one day. And there I was, um, actually just gotten a write-up on purpose to stay on a higher security yard so I could maintain my reputation in there. And it was like on this paper for some church's stationery, and I was like, man, this is like some sort of a sign God is trying to send me. And since then, I grew in my faith, and I think faith and recovery are very similarly based. They say like 3 pillars of self-esteem would be like your relationship with a higher power, education, and exercise, because it's 3 things no one else can take from you, right?
Okay, now I'm going to ask you a question that I ask everybody, always catch them off guard. Is there a book that you have read that really made an imprint on your life?
So many books. Really been a process. I think, one of the big ones was, it's almost cliche, but Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, because here's this guy that's really going through some things and really unjustified, where like in my circumstance it was totally justified. I had earned my place in prison, and this guy wasn't boo-hooing about anything, and he said, I have this goal to see my family one day, and that will allow me to endure anything. And it made me think of, like, when I got that letter, I started realizing, like, I made my family victims, and then, like, my daughter, and then I realized the person I had killed that had a daughter, and she was going to forever feel that same way. And I was like, man, this guy would have done anything to get back to his daughter, and here I am just trying to play up in prison politics. And so that was one of the transformative things. But then I started going through the list of all the big text people would say, for success or for recovery, and gleaning what I could from a multitude of sources. And that's what I liked about Marc's 7 Keys framework, was it's almost like a toolbox that I could organize those different things that I felt really were applicable to me and what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go.
That's what I liked about Marc's keys. It was to have you look inside yourself, what you want, not you should be doing, and it kind of outlines the pathway from point. I guess that's where the name came, right? Pathway to kinship. It does. It creates a pathway to follow from step 1 to the number 7, to give you those goals, to have you reevaluate, to take a look at yourself, to know what you want and how to get there. So that program was available to you while you was incarcerated, is that correct?
Yeah, and it was towards the end of my incarceration, and I had taken, all the available programs, and when Marc had shown up, it was apparent that he, like, cared about people, because a lot of other groups aren't really coming in there, especially not on a consistent basis. And it was inclusive. It didn't say, hey, exclude your other stuff. It said, hey, bring your other stuff and use it here under this framework. And having taken all those different things, it made me well informed on what I liked and what worked, and that's what I kind of, that's why I continued to invest in it in there, and then applied it upon release, because in there sometimes you're kicking it around more theoretically, and people say, well, you're just an inmate, or what do you know? And that's why we documented my transition and how this stuff really works and the tangible results that it shows.
One thing I think that's really important about people like you telling your story is it gives others that are hearing your message hope. A lot of times people see there is no tomorrow, or they say, well, I do have a life sentence. What's the reason to keep on going or doing anything? But we all have to remember we have a purpose for being here. And if you're in prison, maybe you need to find out what your purpose is while you're there, because you have something to offer.
And that's absolutely true. I found, my freedom inside the maximum security institution. And when I could accept that that might be where I stay, but simultaneously, proactively working towards freedom, I could accept that I was there. Because I said, hey, I'm doing everything I can to get out, but I also made decisions that led me to this consequence, and I have to accept that as well. And so I was able to live content in there, and that's kind of what led to my release. I remember in my board hearing, the commissioner at the end, she said, "Do you deserve parole?" And I said, "No." She's like, "This isn't a trick question." I didn't say it was. She's like, "So do you deserve it?" I thought, "No, ma'am." And she had a little look of frustration, like, "What's going on here?" And she's like, "No, let me." And I was like, here, let me explain. Like, I don't deserve it, but if I'm given the opportunity, I will be a good steward of it. Because ultimately, somebody gave their life for me to have mine. And, it's not fair, but I think that's another thing that keeps me striving forward because I realize, I'm the one that should be dead the way I live my lifestyle. So even just to wake up, even if it was inside of a prison, was an opportunity.
Sometimes I too think that in a way, I mean, there's no way to take back what's happened, but a way to honor that person's life is by doing as much as you can possible to help others benefit in those ways of healing and not going down the same route.
Yeah, and that became part of my purpose in there. It was really apparent, and uh, I figured I had the best place to be if I wanted to be involved in that. Where 7 out of 10 California prisoners were coming back, so I said, "Man, if I want to be a part in stopping the taking of lives, I mean, most people that take a life have already had some brush with incarceration." So I really worked with people that were like paroling. And it actually gets a big draw for our group today, even though it was actually geared towards lifers. I seem to really connect with the people that aren't lifers because, I just put it in a statistical way. You know, it's the answer is always yes. Do you not want to come back? People say yes. I'm like, well, if you heard that there was a route where there was only a 1% chance that you came back, or a route where there was a 70% chance you came back, which route would you choose? Like, oh, well, the 70%, but I want the 1% chance. Like, well, lifers come back at a 1%. So what do? Well, they maintain employment in here, they work on self-help groups, and they make a plan for release. So if we can do those things, then you're going to, you have a chance out there, right? You have a 99% chance if you can just work on these things. Because look, the stuff that you see in the Super Bowl, that's great, right? But that's the rewards of practicing every day for a long time. And prison is our practice field to go there and to take, and to be able, and then we go at the end of our day and we're locked in our cell and we have time to evaluate, and I call that watching the film, right? We're watching the film, we're studying it, we're saying, hey, what did I do good today? What did I do bad? How did other people make me respond? Or how did I respond to other people? And how can I, get past that? Why do I respond that way, etc.? And then we can be prepared for society.
Those are all skills you're talking about that we are supposed to learn through our growth and development, but we don't always do that. I mean, we don't always see things clearly until we hit about 30 years old. I think about the stages of life that we go through, and I think that the reason they called it the 7-year itch in marriages was because our cycles seem to be in 7 years. That 18 to 25, there's a huge change in those years. And then 25 to 32, it's another big gap. That and the development of our brain, of course, is still developing into our 20s, where we used to think, oh, at 18, 19 years old, that was it. Now we know differently that frontal lobe of the brain doesn't develop until sometimes 27 or 28, I've heard now. So that explains some of the irresponsible decisions we make when we're younger. Doesn't excuse them, but
No,
explains them.
and I get it. A lot of people incarcerated didn't have good role models. We had dysfunctional things, and the coping mechanisms we had were carrying us through the events we were experiencing when we were young. But eventually, the burden of parenting becomes ours. And, at some point I had to say, I'm the parent, I'm the adult. I'm critical of my parents. Well, now that I'm the parent, can I live up to the standards that I wanted to place on others? And really saying, going back and kind of looking at the child and say, hey, do these things. And I agree that there are things that can work against us, our typical development stages. But likewise, I think being equipped with that knowledge, we can also have forced induction. Meaning, if we work on it harder, I think everything we have, our mind included, is just a muscle. I mean, when I started I barely knew how to read before I was incarcerated. And I started reading, and then I started reading some nonfiction because I said, well, if I'm reading, I might as well start getting educated. And then they started offering college courses, and the first one, I took one class, and I couldn't even see a goal at that point, right? Like a degree, that seems so far away. And so I just said, hey, just focus on one homework assignment, and eventually that progressed to I took 3 classes in a semester, and then I got out, and then finishing my bachelor's, I was working 50 hours a week and taking a full load at a university out here. It's like anything, a little bit of time, a little bit of effort, and it can, and that passion, having that passion, preparing, practicing, and we can improve our chances, right?
Is there one thing you do in your downtime that you absolutely love that's just yours?
I don't know. I go to the gym in the morning. I don't know if I call that downtime, but that's kind of my practice. I listen to something, spiritual, and then I go to the gym. I get out all the demons, and then I can go out into my day. And the other thing I would say was mine, but we really do it as a family, is that we go to the lake. The lake is our jam. In fact, we were out there yesterday. Even our little kids have little wetsuits and are out there riding in the 40-degree water.
That's great. I was just going to ask you if it was a little warmer there than it is here, because it's very cold here. We have lots of snow.
It's warm. It was 70 degrees, so if there's 7 degrees in sun, I call it warm.
That's beautiful. If you can be outside, that's great. So I read a little article in the Sentinel, and there was something that stood out to me, and it said, you come back to spread hope. Is there one way that you feel that you do that, or is it collectively through the program?
I mean, the foundation is the program, right? That is what I have that uh, that built something worth having, which other people want, right? People want to have a good family life. They want to have a house. I mean, I think that's what, even like our Constitution, right to life and liberty and property, right? I think these are just inalienable things that people want. And sometimes, even if we look at recovery material, it says we're driven by the same things. We're just not finding the right ways to accomplish them. But to say, I followed this framework and I was able to get these things in a manner where I'm not harming other people, I'm able to maintain them. And I came from right where you're at, where everybody told me, a lot of people said it wouldn't happen, or they told me, yeah, anything's possible, but they don't give you like a real framework of what that means, or like, well, how do I get there? And I just always, the feedback I always get is that, like, hey, you really gave me hope. Like, now I see somebody that just came back. I mean, they've seen it on videotapes, or they've heard stories, but when they see somebody, especially when I go back to places where people know me and they go, I knew that guy. And when I tell them, like, hey, for a long time, even after I got sober, I was all about being in the mix, and because I was so into that criminal culture, because you get indoctrinated there, and you're like, why would these lames be out here working a job? That's so, that's crazy. And then you're like, whoa, then you start really evaluating what's going on. And so I give them different perspectives that maybe other people they haven't heard, or that other people who haven't been incarcerated and have it. Because a lot of the times I hear and say like, man, that really opened my eyes to things. Uh,
It's funny
I think,
because some of the guys used to say to me, well, why would I want to work a 9 to 5 when I can make that money in an hour? And I said, yeah, but you're sitting in jail right now for 10 years. How much is that
right,
worth to you? You have to evaluate, that $100 for that quick job you just did, or the
yeah,
8 hours you go to work and make that same amount of money, but your freedom is there, you
and
know.
that's why I
That's a
teach in
major thing.
financial freedom. Yeah, that's why I teach in our financial literacy course about the power of investing, because some of the people that come from the drug stuff, I had found myself I had read Dave Ramsey, and it kind of gave me some things to think about. But then I started reading about like how to invest in real estate with zero and no money, and I was really intrigued by this stuff. And I remember I just started getting all my hands on any of the books I could and saving up money because I have that like hustler ambition. And I was like, I'm going to make money this way. I mean, I'm already taking risks with money and I've lost money. So why not do this? At least it can't just be taken from me. And I draw that on a chart a lot of times when I'm there. I'm like, I made this much money at 16. I was like, and then I was 23, and I had all this money on lawyer fees and make this much money for how many years? Or even if you have some money in there, it's like, what are you going to do with it? You going to buy $200 on your books and $200 on somebody else and get an extra package? Like, what do you do? Right? Going to have one nice watch? Like, getting to explain kind of some of those things of like, hey, yeah, cool, you want to be important, you want to make money. Well, this is how you can do it in a social framework, and something that's acceptable and something that's not going to get taken. And they're a lot of times like, wow, if you put money here and you put this much in a month and you're going to get this much return and it's going to look like this in 10 years, they're like, because I mean, even coming from like a middle class background, nobody ever taught me that growing up. So
I took general business in high school where you would think they would teach you that type of stuff, but they didn't. It was more like bookkeeping. It wasn't, financial literacy. Part of the problem in our country is we all live on credit cards. And if you have financial literacy, the first thing you're going to learn is don't use those credit cards. If you have one, use it only in an emergency situation. Your furnace breaks down, something like that. Going out and putting everything on plastic is bad news. And
yeah,
the idea of saving, even if you're only saving $1 a month while you're in, save something. They say if you can do 10%, it's very hard to do when you're in prison, but if you can do that and get in that habit, because that's what it is, it's creating a new habit and
that's what
making
our
your
key
priorities.
Yeah, and that's what our key five is practice, right? We're making habits. Prison's the practice field, and if you get in that practice and you make saving yourself, I think Napoleon Hill in Think and Grow Rich said, "Pay yourself first." So the first place my money goes is to savings, and then I give them little anecdotes that they'll understand. Like if you go to the store guy in there, you're gonna pay 2 for 3. So you get two and you have to pay three back. Or sometimes it's 2 for 1. So you get one, you have to pay two. So then when you get to your store list at the end of the month, you've used this credit and now your $100 is only bought you $50 in food. So now you're playing from behind and now you're always playing from behind. Where if you can get ahead, now your $100 is your $100, and hey, you're already living off of 50, so now you can put away 25 and still have 75 and be ahead. And I talk about that just like with insurance. My insurance, if I don't pay the whole premium, they charge me 17% interest um, to pay in monthly installments. So I know my insurance premiums are going to be due every year. I know the tags on my vehicle are going to be due every year. So I put all that into a money market account where it says FDIC insured and guaranteed not to lose, and it makes 5%. So that's a 22% difference. You know what I mean? So just little things like that, little tricks of the trade, and then that 5% just sits in there every year, and now it's growing and growing. And it's not much,
And
but
unless we're taught these things, we don't really think about financial literacy. I mean, we think of the things we want, but we don't really, I never had any, my mother was one who would spend all the time. She never saved for anything. She was one of those instant gratification people. Where I was the other way around, I didn't like money. I felt like money was, not evil. I just didn't like some of the things people did with their money. I felt they could do better things with it. So you have to have a relationship with money and, a financial relationship, and knowing what you're doing is very important.
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's still taking other principles that they learn in prison. Right? Like, hey, you know how to make a budget because how many times do your store list? They're like, oh, 3 or 4 times. And it's like, well, why? Well, because my first list has everything on it. And then I go, oh, that's too much. And then it's like some of those wants come off, to where then we have our needs and some wants, right? And that's another benefit of the system is that it makes you budget to some extent because even if you had money, you can only spend so much money. So you always have to make some type of list where some things get. The con is that they're going to still bring you food, right? Your lights are still going to be on regardless. So sometimes, and then at the window they go, "Do you want to zero out your account?" And you think, "Well, why not?" Where, like you said, if you could just keep $1, and so a lot of the people that are graduating from our financial literacy class, they're like, "Yeah, I have learned to just put up a couple dollars, and I have learned that when they say." You want to your account that's a marketing technique, and to say no to that. And like seeing just how stuff adds up over time.
I have a question before I forget it. If somebody is listening from inside in California and they're interested in the program that you are bringing in or that Marc is bringing in, what is the program called and who would they talk to?
It always helps when people are reaching out to the CDC department. So their direct contact at their institution would be like a CRM's office, the Community Resource Manager, to say, hey, we would really like to see Pathway to Kinship here. And then couple that with reaching out to Pathway to Kinship and say, hey, we don't have this at our institution or on our yard. We're interested in getting this. And we've reached out to our CRM. And even if we can go above that to Sacramento, the more support we have from the stakeholders and the gatekeepers, the easier it is for us to be able to bring those things to the locations. And they can reach out by mail at Pathway to Kinship at 5627 Canaan Road. That's KANAN Road, number 209, in Agora Hills, California, 91301.
Thank you for giving me that address, and I'll also add that we have a little box that the information goes in that people can look that address up also. Is there anything we haven't covered that maybe we should before we wrap things up?
I mean, I would just want to reinforce encouragement to anyone that's incarcerated or even impacted by incarceration. Like I tell the guys that I teach, you're not going to get rich if you don't show up to work. You're not going to play in the NFL if you don't show up to practice. It involves work on our part. Policies may ebb and flow depending on politics at present, but I think when we put in the work, then we have more control over our destinies. When people really say, hey, you stand out because you've really changed, I think people on either side are willing to advocate for you. And as an incarcerated population, we need to be the best advocates for ourselves. We need to, for those of us who are out, we need to show what incarcerated people can do. We need to lead by example, so it helps other people that we care about who are still inside. It makes that pathway for their citizenship a little bit easier. We can often be our own worst enemies, but if we work together, I think we can be a powerful force for change.
Thank you so much. That was very well said. So I want to remind our listeners we've had Justin Ennis with Pathway to Kinship with us here today. I have to ask one more question. The construction company, is that your company or is that a company you work for?
No, it's a company I work for.
Okay. I just wanted to, if it was your company, I wanted to make sure you got a plug in for it.
No. Still managing. Uh, Definitely a privilege to be mentored. Even being able to work with them has changed their perspective on incarceration. Now when we have spots, we will look to that population to hire, and it's very good.
Yeah, I want to remind our listeners on the outside that second chances are very important. A lot of people coming home have very good work records. They want to keep their jobs. They want to show up for work. So maybe think about banning that box. Are you a felon on your job applications? Again, Justin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah,
And I look forward to seeing other work that you're doing because Pathway to Kinship is really doing some great stuff. And I look forward to maybe some physical curriculum we might be able to look at someday.
Yeah, after this, we can get together and I can forward you some stuff.
Great. All right. Thank you. And for my listeners, I'll be back in a couple of weeks. There's an address at the end of the program where you can write me. I love to hear from you. So don't forget to write and tune in again to the Prison Pod.